All across the nation, people have been extremely disturbed by what they've been seeing and hearing about police shootings of particularly black males. There's been a movement afoot to change police departments and to get rid of systemic racism. I'm Alice Green, the Executive Director of the Center for Law and Justice, which is located in Albany. The local community in Albany has been disturbed for a number of years about policing. The Center for Law and Justice did a survey. The reaction from the community was that there's a great distrust. Is racism at the core of what is happening in our police departments? We've been trying to find ways to address that, to get our government officials involved with discussing this issue and telling us what needs to be done. This evening, we want to make sure that the city officials who will be talking to us address 4 major issues. Acknowledging systemic racism. How can police departments work to improve the relationship between communities and police? The third thing is, how can we actually reform policing as we know it? How do we hold the Albany Police Department and its officers accountable? If we can get them to talk about that, I think the community would be pleased to see what they have to say and the role that the community has to play in this whole effort.
We are here. We have always been here. We are going to stay here. We cannot.
Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Hi, I'm Casey Seiler, editor of the Times-Union. In Albany and throughout the nation, activists have stepped to the center of public discourse with urgent demands for elected officials and other municipal leaders. In order to facilitate what might be described as a socially distanced dialogue, we've assembled 2 groups, a panel of young black activists and a group of Albany's most influential leaders. The second group, appearing with me now, includes Mayor Kathy Sheehan, joining us virtually as she concludes a coronavirus quarantine. And in the studio, we have Corey Ellis, who began serving as the city's Common Council president in 2018, and Police Chief Eric Hawkins, who recently marked the 2-year anniversary of his taking the department's top job. Our panel of activists who gathered recently on the Empire State Plaza includes Paul Collins Hackett, Executive Director of the Red Bookshelf Literacy Program, as well as 3 leaders of the All of Us Community Action Group, one of the leading Black Lives Matter organizations in the Capital Region: Jamaica Miles, Morgan Jones Marina, and Sean Young. Young also takes part in the Times-Union's Community Voices panel, an advisory group representing communities of color in the region. The discussion begins with what might be described as the threshold issue, diagnosing systemic racism.
Really appreciate this opportunity for the 4 of us to be here and talk and also address Mayor of Albany, Chief of Albany, City Council, and gosh, wish David Soares was available to be able to hear this as well. The first topic that we're talking about is an acknowledgement of systemic racism, right? And the effects it has on the local community here in Albany. What does that mean to everybody?
I mean, I think systemic racism, right, is a step away from what people typically think of racism. Typically, they put it on the individual, right? It's easy to point at a person, who claims to be a skinhead or a neo-Nazi or whatever, or says the N-word or says something that is, I think, obviously racist, and think that that's racism. It's a lot more difficult to look at what you're talking about, which is the systems and structures of racism, which are, for example, look at our city school district and how it's funded, right? Albany City School District is owed $30+ million. Just recently, they had to lay off 200+ professionals. There's a 20% cut to the education budget in our state. Albany lost 200 jobs. Guilderland City School District did not. The difference is what, right? There's a lot of black and brown students in Albany High, right? In Albany City School District, period. Not as many in Guilderland. So a part of it is, I think, looking at the way in which our communities are funded and truly invested in.
But what happens when the mayor says, oh, well, I don't fund the school district? It's not my responsibility. Does that mean the mayor has no responsibility when the funding is cut? Is there nothing the mayor could do?
Absolutely not. Absolutely. Listen, it's everyone's responsibility to speak up when they see something wrong, right? The mayor of the city sees, what's going on in the city that she's supposed to represent. She can speak up and say, hey, Governor Cuomo, make sure you fully fund our schools. I haven't seen her do that yet, right? And I think that's a part of the problem. But I want to go just quickly back to this idea like systemic racism. I think when we talk about it as it exists within the institutions and departments and on a larger scale, sometimes it gets maybe a little confusing. Maybe people don't really know exactly what we're talking about. It's a set of priorities that come both from the governmental level and the societal level, the social level, that has consistently and insistently devalued our communities, has defunded us intentionally, left us out of opportunities intentionally. And it's about the choices that were made based on race in this country and power in this country. The culture of racism, the culture of violence continues to affirm itself at every step. So Chief Hawkins, any police officer that says wants to do something different than the officers that are causing harm in the community, if they speak out, they're oftentimes ostracized. It's the culture of, I think, of the police department that continues to reinforce itself on Chief Hawkins, on its officers, on detectives, and they're not willing to change it. And I'm saying that's a possibility. He may, in his mind, be thinking, hey, I am trying to do something, but he can only do so much in the face of that, right? And that's the problem. That's the problem. We need folks that are gonna represent our community to be brave and to step up, and we need the community to make sure that they're there to hold them accountable when they do not, regardless of what happens. Not just the police department, the culture of the DA's office, the culture of City Hall, the culture of the judiciary, right? It's all the same thing that constantly attempts to reinforce itself. It is not willing to change, not without pressure from the people.
All right, so, charges, a bill of particulars against many city institutions. So I guess kind of going around the horn and starting with Mayor Sheehan, how do you specifically see systemic racism playing out in the institutions that you lead? And so, Mayor, in terms of city government, in terms of the management of the city, how have you seen it play out over time?
Well, I think that the institutions have been created predominantly by white people, predominantly by men, and they were created to benefit and with the needs of white males in mind. And so I think, that we heard that some of those decisions that were made very intentionally disadvantaged our Black community, and I agree with that statement. And I think there are a lot that were, where quite candidly, Black people, women, poor people weren't even thought of and weren't even considered. And in some ways, that's even more insidious. And so I think it is important that we speak to it, that we acknowledge it, and that we start to talk about what we need to do to address it. And I think, and I unfortunately can't see who's speaking, but I think that was Sean who was speaking, who talked about
it was,
culture.
yeah.
Yeah, and we have to ensure that there's an accountability structure in place, that we're looking at what we need to do to change that culture, not just change policies, because there needs to be a way for the community to know what's happening, to measure what's happening, to be able to respond to it, and to be able to speak out when there are policies that are in place that are disadvantaging people in the community. And I think we have to go even further, right? The damage has been done. And so one of the things that we focus on is we need to do more. I'm a little responsive to this idea about the school districts. I'm in quarantine because I went to Syracuse to advocate for federal funding for state and local governments. And I want to be clear, that means our schools, right? That federal funding needs to come to us so that we can fund education. and as well as city services. And so I will continue to fight for it. I've been talking about it since COVID started. I'm frustrated that Washington has not acted. I'm frustrated that they don't recognize that they're impacting the lives of our children every day, that they delay that aid. And so I also want to make it clear that I am strongly advocating for aid to our schools as well as to our city workforce.
Coriolis, you're a longtime elected official. You, of course, have strong connections to the business community. You're a mayoral aspirant, yourself. How have you seen systemic racism kind of play out?
Well, I think, going back to Mr. Young, when you make policies and laws and you do not recognize that there was an inherent imbalance from the beginning, like the governor just doing a 20% cut across education lines. So what you're saying is that law fits everyone. You're not taking into consideration a minority populated school district, which needs more resources and more funding to deal with the inadequacy that comes from those neighborhoods. So our Albany School District is going to require more resources. They're going to require more teachers. They're going to require more social workers to be in that school district. So when you do a 20% cut, it's going to hurt that Albany School District more, because a Gilliland School District might not have or need those many resources that Albany School District needs. And that's where you see, when they talk about the institutional racism, systemic racism, when you do not take into consideration of the needs and how that particular group has been disenfranchised for so many years with the lack of funding in those school districts, with the school districts predominantly being segregated. And when you do something, as you make a law or policy saying one size fits all, then you do a disservice to that population that has been disenfranchised.
Would you take issue with the mayor's contention that so much of the systems of the city were kind of set out to preserve a power structure that tended to be white and tended to be male?
Of course. I mean, when you're in charge, right, you set up power structures that continues to keep you in charge. And so we hope, as the years go by, people get more educated, and you have leaders who begin to stand up and say, this is wrong, this is inherently wrong. And where we are today is because of those systems that were put in place to keep minority people from rising up that ladder and being in those jobs, where now we can have a discussion, a frank discussion on what it looks like and what systemic racism is. You can't have that discussion if we continue to say it's not really there. It's because of people aren't really applying themselves. It's because people aren't really engaging, and that's not the truth.
Chief, you're the newest arrival to Albany on this panel, but you're at the same time kind of the man at the center of so many of these debates that we're having right now in the wake of the killing of George Floyd and everything that has occurred since then. So I guess I would ask, over the course of your career in law enforcement, how have you seen systemic racism play out? You, of course, came to Albany after a long career with a city department just outside of Detroit.
Yeah, nobody knows systemic racism in law enforcement more than me. I started out in 1990. I was one of 5 black officers on a force of 180. And I saw and heard some horrible things. I heard African Americans and other minorities treated in just horrible ways. Things that were said were just absolutely horrible. And so as a young man, one of my motivations for wanting to do more in law enforcement was to have more of an impact in the culture of this industry. Because what I saw back then in 1990, there were very few black police chiefs. There were very few black command officers who were in law enforcement. And I knew that I had to get to a position where I can have some more impact and I can have some more influence, because I knew that the industry in 1990 needed a change. And I see 30 years later that it still needs some changes. Things have changed, things have gotten better, but things have not gotten nearly where they should be. But I understand that a person can only do so much. But a person has to use the influence and the platform that he or she has in order to make the most change and have the most impact. And that's what I've been doing since I've been here in Albany. I did that back in Michigan. Making sure that I gave opportunities for minorities and women in law enforcement, making sure that I was a voice in the room. And for me, when I hear systemic racism, that means to me that these are policies and practices and a culture of an organization that promotes or condones inequities. And I cannot allow myself to oversee an organization, whether it's in Michigan or it's in New York, that promotes, condones inequities. And so since I've been here, I've doubled the amount of African Americans that we have in our detective office. I've promoted a black female to a supervisory position as a civilian, created diversity, equity, and inclusion committees within the police department, put together a command staff that shares my values of equity and inclusion and fairness. And more than anything else, I've been a voice in these rooms where high-level police decisions are being made. And it doesn't mean that my voice is the one that dominates. It doesn't, still as a leader of an organization, I've got to make sure that I listen to others and take into consideration what others are thinking, but I'm a voice in that room. Representation, of course, is still an issue on the APD. Only about 13%, I think, of the officers are black or people of color. Only about 10% are women, I believe. Yes. Those are struggles that are ongoing. It's not anything that occurred over the course of the last couple of years, for sure. Yeah, and we're seeing it nationwide, and it's been exacerbated by some of the things we've seen with the civil unrest. This murder of George Floyd out in Minnesota, and even before that, we were starting to see the flow of minorities and women coming into law enforcement to slow substantially. But I've recognized that, and one of the things that I'm very proud of in this department is the creation of a cadet program that will operate as a police internship program, where we're going to bring in young men and women from the city of Albany, focusing on minorities and women, and allow them to come in and learn our industry. Because what I've been hearing and what I've learned over my career is that a lot of young men and women of color don't know this industry. We're telling them, come join us. We need you. Come be a cop. But they don't know it. And so we have to introduce these young men and women to this industry so they can see the good and the bad, and then give them some opportunities to excel. All right. Next up, our panel of activists addresses the impediments to better communication between institutions and communities of color.
Now, about what's happening here is what's happening across another state.
What does that mean for the relationship that residents have with the DA's office, with the police department, with policing in general? What does the relationship look like? Can there be a relationship with the DA's office and the justice system?
Well, how do you have a relationship when you're not in your community? You're not willing to hear your community members.
Now, the DA doesn't have to come outside. He doesn't have to be a part of these conversations. But you ask what it does to the relationship with the community, it makes our kids afraid. We don't know that there's a system of accountability that will protect them at a school. And even after, doesn't have time to be a part of this conversation. So as much as we tell our kids to be involved, to get involved, be good people, be a part of your communities, save the city, it's very hard to explain to them that, listen, we might be on our own on this.
DA's not doing what the DA should do, period. I've seen there's been some type of community conversations that Chief Hawkins has been a part of. I don't feel as if Chief Hawkins is really taking seriously the harm has already been done, the lives that have been lost. I don't see any policy changes that are really addressing that.
I think Chief Hawkins' biggest thing is appeasement. He wants to appease people and give the illusion that he's here to help us, when in actuality, he's not. And he said himself, when we were at that protest in Albany, came out and kneeled because he thought that's what we wanted. No, what we want you is to hold these officers accountable for the things that they're doing in this community. But you don't want to do that, and you don't want to have the conversations that are going to lead to that because it's uncomfortable. And out of being uncomfortable, we grow. But it sounds like you're anti-growth to me.
The thing that I hope that this body understands and learns is to listen to its people. That we do have the answers. We know what's best for our communities. And also, to not lie. Don't try to turn words around or to take data and twist it and say, oh, well, this is the thing or that's a thing. Be truthful, be honest. Stand up and call white supremacy white supremacy. Stand up and say capitalism is ruining things every single day. Talk about how the power and the money impacts the lives of the most marginalized in negative ways. We're sitting out here having a conversation, hoping that other people who have the power to impact lives will do the right thing.
And that's completely ridiculous. You know, not for nothing, we're all here, we're part of nonprofits. We do what's right because it's right, and that's the only reason we need.
The value of our voice versus the value of the voices of those in elected officials aren't on par with one another, right? At least not in their eyes, right? They're like, why should I listen to this 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever people who are talking, who have talked to thousands of folks in the community? Why should I listen to them? They don't have any power, they don't have any title. That type of, I think, thinking infects the entire community, man. It infects us all because it works both ways. If I am the representative of this community and I am showing you that I do not respect or value your voice, how is that felt from the community? Why would I engage, right? Why would I want to be involved? Why would I want to be involved in a system that I know does not value me or doesn't care about me, right? And then this cycle, this negative cycle loop just continues on and on and on. Like, I don't want to be involved, so I don't show up. And then things continue as they are.
But they've showed us how to get them to do the things they're supposed to do. They've made it really clear. They've said, oh, I won't have a conversation with you one-on-one, but when y'all show up together and y'all saying the same thing, I got no choice.
Now, what does power look like? Who has the power in that situation?
They have showed us that the power is in the people, and they leave us no choice.
Right.
They leave us no choice but to be united and to come together and be out in the streets and show up at your front door and do all these things because it's the only time they listen.
Yep.
So if you want us not to be in the streets, you want us not hollering and yelling at you, do the right thing and do it now. Don't wait.
I should note there were references to Albany County District Attorney David Soares, who was invited to be on this panel, but he declined that invitation. So, Chief, you as well were called out in that segment. So I want to go to you first. The reference there was to a scene in early June, in sort of the first week of protests after the death of George Floyd, when in Arbor Hill you went out in the middle of a very large protest and interacted for quite a while with the activists and did in fact, take a knee. I guess the question is, what is the best way for activists and the police departments that they are pressing for change to interact with one another? Clearly, the anger that was being expressed there, the frustration, is that the only way that you're going to see change happen is to go into the streets and demand it. Is there a better way, or is that just the kind of structural, the facts on the ground as to how activists can press for change?
I mean, that's one way, but there are other ways too, and we've seen it over the last couple of years. I've been involved in almost 150 public events, community events, where I've made myself available to talk either one-on-one or in groups with people. So I think that I've made myself available, but I think there's some opportunities to do more. I mean, if people are saying they're not seeing me enough and they're not seeing these opportunities, then maybe I need to make myself even more available. But another thing that they touched on in that clip was accountability. And when I went out there that day and I took a knee in solidarity with those people who were out there, they were talking accountability. And they were saying that they haven't seen accountability in the police department. And my response to them was, look at my record. Not long after I got here, we had that incident on First Street where I had some officers who did some things that they weren't supposed to do. And I did something that's done rarely in police work, anywhere. And I arrested one of my own officers for on-duty actions, suspended several others, and disciplined a handful of others beyond that. That's accountability. That's sending a message. That's changing culture. We talk about systemic racism and institutional racism that changes our culture. It moves our needle a little bit. And besides that, there's been a whole host of other things that have been done behind the scenes in terms of forcing officers out of this department that would have caused harm. Our community doesn't hear about that. They don't hear about those situations where I am about to terminate an officer and that officer resigns in lieu of that termination, or officers who simply go someplace else because they know it's coming. See, all of that doesn't get out. And so I think for me, in order to help our community understand a little bit better about progress and about change, maybe I need to convey some of those things that are happening behind the scenes a little bit more. Those things are changing culture. They're moving the needle. When officers in my department see that they will be arrested for a criminal act on duty by this chief, it changes behaviors.
Two things about the First Street incident and the aftermath, because the investigation was robust. The Times Union has reported on it. It found not only misdeeds by officers on the ground that night, but also leadership failures as well, up the chain of command as well. Two very quick questions. Does the police disciplinary process move as quickly as it needs to instill public trust?
No. I think that's something that can be improved on. Now, I wouldn't want to rush it right now with the system that we have, because then it wouldn't be fair to officers, it wouldn't be fair to our community. We need a thorough investigation where everything is looked at. So I guess the quick and easy answer to your question is, with the way the system is right now, I don't think it's quick enough. But I think it's thorough, and I think it's getting us to where we need to be. But we can have some changes.
In this specific case, Luke Deere, who was the officer you referred to, who was charged with felony assault and misdemeanor official misconduct, we're talking a year and a half after his arrest. The district attorney's office, and I know this isn't your lookout, has not yet taken action on that case. Does that make it more difficult for you to make the case that justice is being done and being done swiftly?
Maybe, but I think reasonable people will see that the police department, the chief of police, did what needed to be done. The timing, I think, could have been better even on the police side. But with the system that we have in place right now, which we're looking at, as we go through this reform collaborative, is something that will be examined during that process as well. It was fair, it was thorough, we got to where we needed to be. It could have been faster, but we did, in the police department, what needed to be done. And I can't really speak to the district attorney's office because I don't have much information as to where they are.
Understood. Okay. Mayor Sheehan, we will talk about more in the next segment about the collaborative effort, but is police discipline one of the issues that needs to be addressed by that large-scale endeavor?
Yes, and it is part of the working group starting their work and working towards making sure that we create a tangible document, right? We have to have real recommendations in hand. But I want to very quickly talk about this frustration around communication, because it's two-way, right? I think that there is this natural tension out there around how do we better communicate? And the chief and I have opened ourselves up. We've had dozens of one-on-one and sometimes 2 or 3 people who have come in to talk to us about their issues. We made it very clear when we started to see the protests, we wanted to create that space for people to come directly to us and talk about the changes that they wanted to see. So anybody and everybody could email change@albanyny.gov, and you still can. And we will have those conversations in person, via Zoom, anonymously, however people want to speak to us. And I also do believe strongly that being out on the street is important. I think that we are going to do more and go further in the police reforms that are going to be undertaken, because so many hundreds and thousands of people have taken to the streets and said, this isn't just a few people, this is hundreds and thousands of people from all walks of life who want to see these changes. So I see those as being, important. Both of those forms of communication are important, but I want to make it very clear. Anyone who wants to speak to me and the chief, me alone, the chief alone, we want to speak to you, and we want to be held accountable to them. And those face-to-face conversations, I don't want to speak for the chief, but sometimes they're hard. Yes, you do have to be uncomfortable. And I have to put myself in positions and situations where I feel uncomfortable, and that's where growth and change come from.
Corey Ellis, do you think that there is enough of a space for activists and either elected officials or city leaders to kind of come together to address these issues, or it really is it a matter of you got to be in the street?
Absolutely, there's enough space. I mean, we have neighborhood association meetings in every neighborhood. Elected officials go to those meetings. Law enforcement go to those meetings. We're a legislative body of government. We meet twice a month on Mondays. We have committee meetings where people come and discuss those. So there is an avenue. And so one thing I'd like to talk to activists, especially being an African American and growing up in those neighborhoods. I don't need to hear, I know what the problems are. I know in this seat that I sit in, I know the issues that you want and the policies that you want changed. And the council has acted on that. I knew when I was on the council 12 years ago that we wanted, when our police review board, we wanted subpoena power. But at that time, we did not have the council members on that body that could make it happen. The body makeup, as we talk about institutions and we talk about people being progressive, it was not a progressive council. So this time, knowing this issue and this would resonate with the activists and with people, we put in a local law to do that. Knowing that, because we have a different council now. We have a different mindset on the council. And these council members, they hear these communities because most of them have come from those communities. They understand what they want. But the communication is open. We're a legislative body. You know, we're governed by law to have open public meetings. So they, if people feel like they have to take the streets, fine. But we have an open door policy, and every council member, if you contact them, we'll have that discussion and we'll move on that.
All right. And now let's hear our panel of activists discussing the lack of accountability as they see it that many place at the center of the problem of police misconduct.
Across the nation, what you're seeing is an understanding.
We talked about the fact that Elazar Williams will never walk again. And there was no accountability for the officer that caused that harm. So what would it actually look like to have accountability? What would that look like in Albany specifically to have accountability? How do we make that happen?
Well, first thing I would say is stop allowing the police to investigate the police. Let's give some power to the CPRB, right? That they can initiate investigations, they can see a police officer's record, right? And they can recommend some sort of action that's binding to the police department. Throughout the state, the repeal of 50A, y'all remember that, right? It allows us to see the misconduct records, or the disciplinary records, supposed to be able to see it, right? And what's the pushback? Immediately, as officers' records are being foiled, what's happening? The PBA and other entities are deciding, no, we're gonna file injunctions with the court to block certain things in an officer's record. What are they trying to hide? Like, in all honesty, if we can see that there is some sort of pattern that has developed over time that may have some ramifications on some act that happened, why wouldn't we wanna see that? Right? We're not saying that because you did all this stuff here, you have to be guilty of this. No, we're saying that it might be helpful to know that, hey, you've been kicking people in the last 5 years, and now someone else got kicked, and here you go, right? It might be helpful to know that. That's all I'm saying. That's how it concerns the police.
You asked accountability, what does it look like? I'm kind of jaded, I won't lie to you, in the fact that I'm done begging for them to have a moral compass and to acknowledge us and treat us with respect and dignity. So now, what accountability looks like to me is independent oversight. So, like he said, CPRB, we need to be able to monitor things and have our own independent investigations. We should all know how to get involved, how to be engaged. We should all have a tangible role. I think that's what I'd look for in terms of accountability. Let us into the process.
We shouldn't have to go through the police to get to the review board. Like, we should be able to go straight to the review board. How am I going to tell you, you're hurting me, stop hurting me, and I need to complain, I need management, and can I talk to management? And I'm going to you, and you're like, nah, because I want to keep hurting you. So you can't go to management because I don't feel like your complaint is valid. Yeah. How is that a thing that we have to go through? Why can't I just go straight and be like, okay, this was what happened, I'm being hurt in this way, management, how can you help me? I think it's ridiculous, it's ludicrous that we have to go through the people that are hurting us to maybe get help, for them to decide if we deserve help.
Why is it Mayor Sheehan standing up saying it can't be this way anymore? Why is it the city council calling for a special, I don't know, community conversation that's actually led by the community, founded in the community, discussed by the community, decided by the community, because the current task force was not created by the community?
All right, Mayor Sheehan, you were the person called out at the end of that segment, so we'll begin with you. Is it fair to say that in the capital region, at least, police review boards tend to be well-intentioned but toothless? And if that is the case, what can be done to give them greater force?
So I think at the time that our review board was created and as it has evolved, it has been on the leading edge for the country. And I know that for people who want to see more, that doesn't mean much. But we have been seen across the country as a leader with respect to the scope of authority that's been given to our review board. And we also have an oversight of that board that happens through Albany Law School. The city spends over $260,000 a year to ensure that there is independent oversight of our civilian police review board, and we need to do more. So the review board itself has made recommendations, and those recommendations I'm sure will be included in a policy document that the council then needs to act on. And I believe we need to have that conversation. I agree, there should be no wrong door. You shouldn't have to go to a police department or a police station to file a complaint. So those are all changes that I support and that I hope come out of this process. And I also believe it's important to allow all community voices to be heard as part of this process. And so there are going to be more public meetings. There are going to be those opportunities that I hear, rightfully so, these activists demanding, which is to be able to have a voice. In the course of that short clip, I heard a number of really good ideas. And so it is my hope that they bring those ideas and ensure that those ideas are included in the final recommendations that we make as we transform our police department. And one final thing, this idea of independent oversight, I think is really important. And that's why the chief and I have embraced the decision of the city's chief city auditor to bring in a third party to look at what we're doing, what we're measuring, what the results are of what we're measuring, what we're not measuring that we should be, and how do we compare to other police departments? How do we compare to what our community's expectations are of this police department? And that's happening independently. And I think that that is really important. Ultimately, I want to ensure that this city has a police department that reflects the wants, the desires, and the expectations of the members of this community. That's the goal, and that's what we're working towards.
So this is the CNA audit that's $80,000 to essentially assess bias within the department, correct?
Yes, it's that and it's more, right? They have done this work in other police departments. And to me, one of the things that they've done really well is to talk about what does the public facing accountability piece look like? What should we be reporting out to the community monthly, quarterly and yearly, so that it is transparent how this department is operating?
Mayor, very quickly, do you believe that the police review board should have subpoena power?
I think that we should be seriously looking at that. Subpoena power, look, I'm a lawyer, right? So I don't want to get an overly legalistic answer, but yes, I believe that they should have access to more information. And, anytime something comes to a subpoena, it means that we're not giving somebody something that they think that they should already have. So I also think we need to look at that, right? What information are we providing? When are we providing it? This whole disciplinary process needs to be reviewed. both what happens internally and what happens externally. But I also don't want to race to the bottom. Just because other people don't get due process doesn't mean we should take away due process for everyone. I want to fight for due process for everyone. And so I think we have to be mindful of that as well.
Coriolis, how can a police review board be a better tool?
Well, you know, the activists talked about, we know for centuries the police department cannot independently, cannot investigate themselves. We need an independent investigation on police matters. It's clear, and the Citizen Review Board, giving them subpoena power, the right subpoena power, will help go a long way with making that happen. Because when we look at it as legislators, as council members, this was one of our key components. 50A was one of our key components. And also making into law a policy in the police department where certain officers, policy used to be where officers who owned the uniforms had to wear police cameras. Our legislative body said, no, we want every officer who interacts with people to have a camera on their body. That's another law that's in committee as well. And when people, the one misconception I really want people to understand, the body that the police chief and the mayor had to put together was an executive order by the governor of the state of New York. So when people look at it as, oh, this is something the mayor and the chief created, the governor created this body. The governor attached, if we didn't do this, we could lose financial dollars from the state.
Not just Albany, every community across the state is under this executive order to try and reinvent.
The council did its job before this executive order came out. If the executive order never came out, we will be having these discussions. We'd be having these overviews of these laws that the council have put in place to someday pass. We would be having that discussion, and the police chief would be there, and the mayor would be there. We'd be having those committee discussions with the community coming in, talking about, oh, we don't agree with this part of the law. We'd be having those discussions already. So I don't want the activists to look at the body that the mayor and the chief had to put together as something that was trying to go against or hide the transparency.
Chief, would a more robust police review board, potentially with subpoena power, make your job easier in terms of interacting with the public and building public trust, or make your job more difficult in terms of your relations with your officers?
Both. I think that the public wants to see something more. And, you know, fundamentally, I agree with the mayor, council president, and with the activists. You know, I think in our internal review and disciplinary process, there are some opportunities to bring some other people in and give them more input. Subpoena powers, you know, when you mention that to law enforcement personnel, there's automatically resistance because there's this idea that
only suspects get subpoenaed.
Well, exactly. That's exactly it, because that's the connotation that we have. And but I think that if we can have some deeper conversations about this, I think that we can have some understanding about what this really means. And what it really means is that the public is asking for some more transparency and some more input. They want access to documents in a timely and thorough manner. And so even before we get to the subpoena idea, I've had some conversations with my Office of Professional Standards. And my direction to them is to make sure that we are producing every single document that we are legally obligated to produce in a timely manner. Now, I know there's been some disagreements with this timeliness issue, and I get that, but it's not an excuse, but there are some reasons for that. But fundamentally, I'm with it. I think that it can work, but I think we have to have some understanding and some deeper conversations with all the parties involved.
All right, and finally, from our panel of activists, a discussion about the drive for transformation as opposed to the more familiar prescription for reform.
Across the nation, what you see.
I'm listening to y'all, and we're talking about change, right? So what does that change look like? How do we get to transformation as opposed to reform?
Well, one thing that I can think of, you know, reform it feels disingenuous to me. It doesn't feel like enough. We need more. We need, you know, dramatic change right now in a meaningful way, in a tangible way. And I definitely agree with what you were saying about the chief and the culture. You know, one great example I have about that is the LEAD program. the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program. Now, the goals of that program were to divert individuals who didn't have a violent offense into treatment as opposed to being arrested. So there was an idea. There was an idea to reshape policing, to reshape police interactions, to reapproach the community. I'm on board. I love that. I feel like that could be a great help to people. It makes a lot of sense. Then the culture thing became a problem. The first thing we noticed in the arrest data was that there was a racial disparity. Eventually, the arrest data stopped coming. I'm not sure where LEAD currently stands. I think it's something that could be transformative as opposed to just a new rule. We're gonna have a new training. We don't need training, we need new systems.
There's two things I want to point to, but I want to get to the training part that you just said. There was a woman that was at a community conversation where we had a lot of members of the community. We had some representatives from the police department there, and they kept this training kept coming up, right? It was like, yo, like we do need more training. It was acknowledged by the representative of the police department. Yes, we do need more training. And this woman just screamed, "You don't need more training. You don't need more training, because you don't need training in white neighborhoods. You don't need training there. You know how to act there. You don't need training to be a human being there. Why do you need training to be human in my community?" That was such a powerful moment, because I think I believe that already. I just had never articulated in that particular way, right? And she's right. Like, you don't need more training. It's something else going on there, right? And this idea of reform, I think, versus transformation. Reform is problematic because it's only acknowledging the symptoms of the issues. It's not acknowledging the causes, the root causes, right? And I think that until we're able to do that, and it's going to take transformation to get to the root causes, to upend that tree and that root and find another way. And it's going to take all of us to do that. It's going to take our community coming together to be creative and figuring out how we should be moving forward with a community that works for all of us, not just some of us. Go ahead.
I appreciate that we've had the opportunity to have this conversation, that as Black people, we've had the opportunity to have this conversation, to have a platform, to have our voices heard. I hope that the people in power listen to what we've said, respond in a way that gives hope. I love being in community with y'all. Like, this is what we do, right? And so that's what we're gonna keep doing. And I hope that the mayor and the chief and city council and DA Soares are listening to it.
All right, well, I know that the three people in this panel discussion are listening. One hopes that the district attorney is watching as well. So with that, to wind up our conversation, I do want to dig a little bit deeper into what is going to be the city's big response to this historical moment, and that is the City of Albany Police Reform and Reinvention Collaborative. So more than 35 people, everybody else on the stage or appearing virtually like the mayor but me, are part of the organization. I have watched some of the Zoom discussions that have already taken place, more than a half dozen so far. They look agonizing in terms of virtual meetings. What is the hope that that this collaborative will actually manage to bring the kind of change that clearly the activist community, or this portion of the activist community, is demanding? That this not be another kind of task force that produces a report, makes some kind of minor structural tweaks, and then moves on?
Well, I think the misconception is this task force is making these decisions, right? The task force is just tasked to come up, gather information, put out there what already exists, and then work in their small groups, and that part of the task force make those recommendations. Those recommendations will be put towards the people. So this is not going to be a task force that just comes up with a document, pass it off to the city council, and be done with it. The people are going to engage in that document as well. It's just like us passing any law that we do at city council. Those laws are vetted. We have community meetings, we have committee meetings, people come in, say what they don't like about the law, have you thought about this? So there is going to be an engagement in this process. This task force is just not there that's going to say, here's a document, pass it, and let's move on. And so I would like to let the community know there is going to be a vetting of the documents that come in front of you by you as a citizen, and you have that voice to vet it. And as city council members, who you can hold accountable, we're the ones that are going to be passing this law, these reforms. And like I said, the city council have already shown its intentions by the laws we have already on the books, ready to be passed. And so this reform document that comes in front of the city council will be vetted, not by just council members, but by the community at large.
Mayor, the concern I've heard from some is that the sort of new generation of activists, especially from the Black Lives Matter movement, are not as included in the collaborative as perhaps they should be, certainly not as much as they want to be. Do you think that's a fair criticism? And what are your hopes for what comes out of this when the collaborative is done with its work? It's got a deadline of next April.
Well, I think that we do have a lot of young activists who we invited to be part of this collaborative and to bring the voices of that community and of that new, there are a lot of people who are have become active because of the murder of George Floyd, to bring those voices to the table, right? And so we want to ensure that those voices that are at the table bring with them the voices that want to be at that table. And that's why there's opportunity for public input. There are, we've broken down the task force into working groups, but knowing that there will be overlap. I would expect working groups to have overlapping recommendations around things like training, recruitment. What is it that we want from a police officer? What are we asking of a police officer? What should our police officers be responding to? And so, I think we want to ensure that all voices are at the table, and there is plenty of opportunity. Anybody who wants to submit information can submit information. Everything that these task forces are doing and these working groups are doing is public. All of the documents that they have, the public has. The conversations that they're having, the public can hear. And there will be opportunities for the public to participate in those conversations. And so I'm looking forward to the work that is going to be done. And I'm also a person who believes very strongly in accountability. And we have to ensure that when we make changes, we have a way of making sure that the public is holding us to those changes. And we also have to look at where the gaps are. So one of the areas that is a real challenge are mental health calls. And this has been a subject of discussion from police departments across the country. Called Cahoots, that's been around for 37 years. The chief and I want to go out and take a look at that. There's Dasher in Denver. So there are other models out there. And so, we are already actively looking at those other models, and we know that we need to change. We know that we need to make changes. And the more people who make their voices heard, the better our decisions are going to be.
Chief, last question goes to you. The story, the three, I think, major stories in Albany this year have, of course, been the effects of the coronavirus pandemic, the impact that the protests in the wake of the killing of George Floyd have had. That is, of course, the major narrative that we've all been discussing over the course of this discussion. And also, of course, the upsurge in violence in the city that we've seen over the course of this year. We are speaking just a couple of days after a 24-hour period when 6 people were shot. Thank God, none of them fatally. How much is the issues that have been raised, the distrust, the breach between the public and the police, related to the problem of violence?
It has some relation. All of the studies have shown that police departments who don't have much trust from those in the community, they have problems resolving issues. I think this one went beyond that, though. This was something that, first of all, there are a whole host of underlying social issues that we're dealing with in the first place. Young men that are 16 and 17-year-old that are balanced, that have mentors, that have they have the support that they need, Those sorts of young men don't wake up one day and just decide they're going to go fire a gun 20 times at somebody else because they have some sort of feud or beef with them. So we've got to resolve those issues. We've got to get the violent individuals off the streets. But more importantly, we cannot cause harm to our community when we do it. I've seen over my career several different periods of time when we've had increases in violence like we're seeing right now. And the instinct, which turned out to be wrong from police departments, has always been to have a heavy-handed response, go in, because most of the upticks that we're seeing historically in right now in Albany are in our minority neighborhoods. And so the impulse is to flood these neighborhoods with police officers and have a heavy-handed approach and make it go away. Make your police department make these problems go away. And I've seen it over my career where it's caused more harm. And it's created even more of a divide, and it has impacted the trust that you just talked about. And so as chief, as I'm looking at these things happen, I've got to take into consideration the possibility that my response to this violence may make things worse in this community. And so we've got to take a strategic and rational and balanced approach to how we look at this. And that doesn't mean that we're soft on crime. That doesn't mean we're turning our backs on what's happening, but it means that we're situationally aware of what's happening, not just here, but around the country. We're going to get this under control. You know, I've seen this come and I've seen it go. And with the right approach, you can address these problems without creating a divide and without creating this dissension and contention between the police officers and those in our community.
So I think it's fair to say that on that issue, on the prospect and the perils of over-policing, you are very much in agreement with our activist panel as well. And with that, that assumed agreement, we will leave it. So thank you to Mayor Sheehan, Corey Ellis, and Eric Hawkins for joining us today. And thank you to the community members who took the time to sit down and have a conversation with us. For more information on the Time for Reckoning and resources, visit nynow.org or timeforreckoning.org and continue the conversation on social media with the hashtag TimeForReckoningNY.
Racial injustice right here in the Capital District. There's racial injustice right here in the Capital District, in Troy, in Albany, in Schenectady. It's here. It's here. And we need to be just as loud about what's happening here as what's happening across in another state, what's happening in Georgia. Because racial injustice knows no borders. Do you hear me? Racial injustice knows no borders. And neither will I fight against it.